So I'm Martin Stanford, one of the presenters on LBC News.
And Martin, to our surprise, when we started to look into this story, we discovered that you had been and your family had been caught up in it. Just tell us a little bit about your family's experience.
We do. I mean, my wife Sarah and I have got 3 sons, and it was our middle boy who's the most seriously affected by this. Having said that, he is what is described, I think, in the terminology as high functioning autistic, and we've met and we know of families, who are in some ways dealing with even greater challenges. Quite a few people somewhere on this spectrum of experience where you land are non-verbal, and so family life and communicating and looking after people is much more challenging. But for us it came about because Sarah is an epileptic, and the thing to say about this sodium valproate drug was, on the face of it, it's a miracle cure. I mean, she spoke to her specialists and it was already being readily prescribed, but as the complete solution. And we can vouch to that. Apart from one epileptic fit, and we've been married nearly 30 years now, she's been completely fine. So what it was said to do on the tin, which is to control epileptic fits and seizures, it does it fantastically.
So when did she first start to take it?
Oh, before we met.
Right.
Yes, when she was late teens, I think, she switched to it. Having, as I think many people who are diagnosed with epilepsy, doctors will probably try a number of treatments to see which one works with you. And it's very sensitive, this. There was one, the brand, it's a sodium valproate is the main active component, of course, but the brand is called Epilim, made by Sanofi in France, and it is so precise, this thing that sort of keeps her brain under control, is that when one doctor once tried to sit it to, don't have Epilim, have another sodium valproate from somebody else. I suspect it was probably cheaper, but she immediately felt very odd and very ill. Mm-hmm. So if it works for your brain and keeps those things under control, it really does work. So she was taking it regularly, and then we we started talking about having a family and things like that. She went to talk to the GP and her specialist. And the thing, which is a story you've probably heard, Lewis, is that there was almost no mention of any risk to the unborn child. I can distinctly remember having a serious conversation about spina bifida. That was one of the possible consequences, which I think the GP or somebody mentioned. And we faced the dilemma of, like anybody who gets pregnant, the pregnancy is wanted, but you want to check. Well, how far do you take those checks? I remember, because of this worry about spina bifida might be involved, do we have amniocentesis, which is a very invasive procedure and not without risk. It can bring the pregnancy to an end. And we decided not to. I vaguely remember hearing X-ray tests that were done on the fetus, and some tiny measurement of how the infant's spine was growing meant that they thought probably spina bifida was not going to be a problem. So on we go. But I don't remember people talking about autism.
It's never mentioned as a possibility, as a risk, as a danger.
It was... Sarah says that she can vaguely remember one, it might have been the GP, it might have been the specialist mentioning this. But this is the point, in that I think the delivery of the warning, which as we now know, was there. It was on the medical literature. But as we also know, it seemed to be the message to GPs and others is don't emphasise this. And I think we're living proof that was the case. If there is a risk, either GPs, they've got thousands and thousands of conditions to keep up to speed with. They basically said, look away. Do not emphasise the risks. Anyway, our firstborn was fine, actually. Sarah, I remember, took an extra walloping dose of folic acid, because that was recommended at the time, as part of the just good health planning and things like that. Billy came along as our second son. He was born quite quickly after the first, and he's not, how do I say it? He is autistic. That's right. He's on the spectrum, and he has challenges, but he's relatively high functioning. He lives independently most of the time, comes back to our house most weekends. He holds down 2 part-time jobs, and can do okay. But is he the result of careless or something worse than that use of medicines? I think he is, yeah.
And that must have burdened you, troubled you a lot over the years.
Well, you come to terms with it, I think, as parents. I think we too decided, if you do experience anger at this, you've got to get over that. I mean, what will be, will be. This is the challenge we have to face, and you can't stay angry all your life.
Is he aware of it? Is he
oh,
aware?
very much so, yes.
How does he feel about it?
I mean, Billy has ADHD as well as autism. And he's only too aware that he is autistic, and he gets incredibly frustrated with his own inability to do things, or perhaps his habit of making mistakes, of becoming more angry than maybe he should do, or not being able to be like his siblings, or not being able to be like other people. So, yeah, he's aware of his own predicament.
And is he aware that this is highly likely to have come about because of the sodium valproate? Is he aware of the background and context?
We haven't dwelt on that. I think as an issue. I'm sure he's look, as a young man, he's very well read, can use a computer, keeps up with the news. But I mean, the issue of whether or not this was irresponsible use of medicines where the risks were not explained is something we sort of have touched upon as a family. And whether or not he is owed compensation is an area we haven't bothered to dwell on now, because it looks, frankly, so unlikely.
But you think he does deserve it, morally?
Of course he does. Of course he does. I mean, the comparison with thalidomide, I know, has been made by Sean Linton at the Sunday Times and others. I think it's in sense I think it affects more people than thalidomide, but it's also much more difficult to understand and to receive understanding, because visually thalidomide was a very obvious predicament for those people who were born with limbs missing, or shortened limbs, or whatever it was. When you talk about mental health or mental ability and things like that, one of the challenges you face on the autistic spectrum is you look like a regular human being. And it's probably, if you're not tuned into it, it's probably very late into a person's relationship that you actually understand. Okay, that's maybe they're socially a bit awkward, or the language they use, or perhaps the delivery, but it's not immediately obvious at all that you're on the autistic spectrum. So therein lies the challenge of, if you're going to seek employment, if you're going to get through life, if you're trying to find a life partner, you've got to have somebody who can see past that.
What's your sense of, politically, how this is intersected with the political system and Westminster over the years? Because it has been carried from minister to minister, government to government, and yet we seem to be
I tried desperately, after years and years and years of doing this and reporting on politics and everything else, to try not to be cynical about politics. I genuinely think that most of them are in it to try and make the world a better place. That said, when this kind of issue comes up, you do wonder, why do people support you when they're in opposition? Why do people support you when they're a constituency MP? And yet when they receive high office, suddenly that support seems to evaporate. I think this is a challenge Wes Streeting's going to face, because he now knows the Patient Safety Commissioner has issued a report saying compensation should be paid. It's his job to persuade Rachel Reeves to pay it. Is he going to win that argument? I don't know. Jeremy Hunt, as a constituency MP, was very sympathetic. I don't know if he had a constituent with a case like this, but he was sympathetic to the cause. When he became Health Secretary, I think he was vocal about how this is a wrong that should be righted. When he became Chancellor, suddenly he'd run out of money. So these are a very good cause for politicians to appear empathetic and sympathetic and to support constituents in their hour of need, until they get into a position of power. Then they seem to run out of oomph.
Martin, in our sort of day-to-day lives, we spend a lot of time, and have spent a lot of time, respectively talking about, great failures of the state, of scandals. One doesn't have to cast one's mind back very far. There's the post office scandal, the contaminated blood scandal, endless COVID-related scandals. Do you think this is up there with all of those things you've mentioned, thalidomide? Do you think that this is up there with those in that pantheon, for want of a better word?
The same principles apply, Lewis. An injustice has been done. Legal action against Sanofi, the company that make Epilem, is not a realistic prospect. Legal aid was withdrawn. Cases have been won in France. One mum took Sanofi to court and won, I think, in the order of hundreds of thousands of euros as a case. That was never going to be a route. So it falls on the state to make amends for a mistake. Proper warnings were not given or suppressed or not promulgated in an effective way, and they've made an error. And look, the state has worked in the sense of, after years and years of campaigning, committees looked into it, MPs looked into it. The last government but one said, we need a patient safety commissioner. Was that a cynical move to push debates like this further down the road? A patient safety commissioner was appointed. Guess what? She looked into the Cumberledge report. Baroness Cumberledge did a great job in looking into this and concluded that payments should be made. Then they put that on the shelf and say, we need a patient safety commissioner. Was that just an invention just to introduce delay? I don't know. I've spoken to Henrietta Hughes. I think she's a genuine person doing a genuinely good job. Guess what? She says compensation should be paid. In opposition, Labour said compensation should be paid. West Streeting, it's over to you.
Are you sure you're not angry about it?
I'm angry on behalf of Billy. Well,
it's okay.
While I'm still around, we can do our best to look after Bill. But we won't be here forever. His brothers will help him, I know they will, but it shouldn't be down to them. The state owes Bill a helping hand. I think they should pay it.
Martin, thanks so much. Thanks for your time.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.